Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where you meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg.
Mind the gap between a train and the platform. Mind the gap between a train and the platform.
Welcome, Shipping Podcast listeners. This is the 37th episode of the Shipping Podcast. We are rapidly approaching a 1-year anniversary. Thank you for listening. I know that some of you are so loyal and that you are waiting for the next episode and you are listening to everything. This is such a great adventure for me. And I know that this is taking off now. It's growing and people are getting more and more interested. And I have got all the interesting guests on my show. In this episode, you're going to meet with Diane Gilpin, the founder and CEO of the Smart Green Shipping Alliance. She's pioneering renewable energy in the maritime sector. We met on the 3rd of February when I was in London. And I hope you get challenged by everything we speak about, because we are mostly outside the box when we speak about renewables, circular economy, and so on. I hope you enjoy. This is Diane Gilpin for you. So welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself? Who are you?
Thank you, Lena. It's lovely to talk to you. I'm Diane Gilpin, and I designed and lead the Smart Green Shipping Alliance, which is a collaboration of really smart and committed people who are looking to solve big problems within the shipping system. So we look at the shipping as a whole system. And we started thinking about, I come from a background in renewable energy and big innovation, so started to think about how renewable energy could be applied in a maritime context. And so we figured out that wind wasn't exactly new to this sector, and we were looking at how you could take technology that was being developed in yacht racing and adapt it for commercial shipping. So I spent a bit of time working in Formula One in my dim and distant past, and in that context, a lot of the work that was going on the racetrack would end up in your road car. So you would be looking for the Formula One car to have provided your car with extra safety, with improved efficiency, with more lightweighted material, with push button. All of that came out of Formula One. So you're not driving a Formula One car, but you're driving a vehicle that has the advantages of the Formula One technology. So when I was looking at how wind could be used, we looked at yacht racing and some of those techniques. So the design for a 21st century sailing cargo vessel is as different to the Cutty Sark as a Ford Mondeo might be to a Model T Ford. I mean, this is a complete... And so one of the things that happens when we talk about wind at sea is people see the glorious old clipper ships, but it's not actually that visually similar.
So what is your background? Are you an engineer or...
I'm an economist by education, and I have had the privilege of working at the cutting edge of lots of different new technologies and innovations. Cellular telephones before they were invented, and as a consequence of working in that sector when the phone wasn't, the cell phone was deemed to be a thing that would never ever happen, we started to demonstrate that you could actually make a telephone call from a car by putting one in a Formula One car, which is how I got involved in Formula One motor racing. And I've worked in the city looking at developing financial information systems. So really what I do is work in innovation and then taking a vision and putting it strategically in place by using the experts that are best at doing what they do. So in this context, we're working with marine engineers, we're working with naval architects, we're working with Lloyds Register as a classification society, with Rolls-Royce looking at different engines, with shipbuilders, with brokers, with finance, with insurers, with ship owners and with cargo owners, so that the whole of the ecosystem can input into solving the problem. So it's not, oh, here's a ship, we'll stick some sails on it and expect it to work. We recognise that it has to go into a very complex and interconnected system, and that it needs to be versatile enough to get into that system and work today, and to have a long-term strategy so that we can get to some sort of scale of the vessel. So we know which types of ships would be best with this type of technology. I think there's one thing that's really interesting for me anyway, to think about with renewable energy, which is when I say renewable energy to some people, they think that I'm some sort of tree hugger, and that I just want to save the planet. And I mean, it's true that it would be quite nice if that happened, because I would like to continue to live somewhere.
And you will win the Nobel Prize.
Yes, that's right. But I think it's also the economic impact that renewable energy can have on an infrastructure asset. So the way that I think about it that's easy for me to understand is I put solar panels in my house, I invest a little bit of my savings, and I know that I'll have free energy for the rest of, or free electricity for the rest of my life. So what that enables me to do is to plan my retirement a little bit more creatively, with a little bit more spare cash than I would have done. So I'm now autonomous. I'm separate from the grid system. So I can continue to operate my life without fear of shock of fuel prices. And I know that the upfront payment will be paid back over time. So it's a very good investment. So when we think about that in terms of infrastructure, if you're a business, so in your one of your earlier podcasts with Karin, when she was talking about wanting to understand the price point at which the oil majors would be bringing low sulfur or suitable fuel into the market, and they couldn't tell her, it meant that she couldn't plan her business. So if you have a technology that enables you to harness free fuel, you have an autonomy, you have some ability to separate yourself from that existing bunker infrastructure. You also have the ability to hedge your fuel price again in the future, because you know, although we don't know what the wind will do on any route from day to day, we know that statistically over the last 20 years it has blown like this on this route, and therefore we can quantify and verify the amount of energy we'll get from a particular piece of renewable energy technology.
So where did you get the shipping bug? When and where?
I think by accident, really. I got infected with the shipping bug because I came out of renewable energy, and it seemed to be very obvious that you should put renewable energy into the shipping sector, and sails have been on ships for thousands of years, so it would be really easy. It's not really easy. And because I'm fairly tenacious and curious, I was not to be put off by being told that we didn't do it like that. In the same way, I was not to be put off by being told that you didn't do telephone calls on anything except something that was stuck to your desk, when I could see very clearly that it was possible through technology to do mobile telephone calls. I think, well, it is possible, so how do we do it? So in order to do that, I had to understand how the shipping system worked. And with a background in economics, it's really interesting because it's one of the purest kind of economic systems that you can see in. It's very
supply and demand driven.
Yeah, very supply and demand, very unfettered with little complex national and domestic legislation. So it's very interesting from a kind of high level intellectual perspective, but it's also populated with really fascinating people. And so I've very much enjoyed learning from and with all of the different people in the shipping ecosystem, if you like. So one of the most exciting things that has happened to date in our journey is we had a bunch of commercial naval architects from Rolls-Royce and a group of racing yacht designers, and they had very clear views about how things could be done, and they also had relatively clear views about the other side not being able to do it in quite the same way. And so it was a little bit of a struggle to get everybody to come to the table. And when we did, and we just then put the challenge in the middle of the table, they forgot all about what they were supposed to be, who they were supposed to be, and they just started to address the challenge. They just started to go, yeah, but if we were to do this, and what about that? And, or we could, yeah, and it was brilliant. I mean, it was just like seeing history in action. And so that's very, very exciting. And because I have a background in this kind of technology and innovation, and I spent about 5 years working in Formula One and a bit longer in wider motor racing, it really seemed to me very, very much like a Formula One team. So if you have a Formula One team, you've got to have somebody who does it. You've got the engine guy, you've got the composites people, you've got tyres, you've got the commercial people, the people who look for the finance. It's very much like that. You've got to get everybody aligned towards a goal. And the goal is to put a demonstrator ship in the water. That's what we need to do so that we can understand more about how it physically is going to work, but we can also have people understand that it has potential to work in a real system, in a real shipping situation. And so that's very exciting. And we also have a cargo owner who's very keen to support the demonstrator vessel through a commercial contract. I'm very keen that it's not. I think it would be a shame if it was a sort of showboat rather than a commercial ship. I think it needs to be commercial. And what's particularly interesting to me is that the cargo owner is prepared, the shipper is prepared to talk to us about a long-term contract because we can fix an element of our fuel costs against this renewable energy, free fuel, if you like. And so what that does is it puts a stable point in this movable system. So if that shipper is prepared to give us a long-term contract, that gives everybody else in the team the confidence to continue to put in all the effort that's required to solve the myriad of problems. So there's technical problems, there's commercial challenges, there's logistics, how do you get things on and off, the whole gamut. Legal problems, absolutely. So it's a whole system thing. And so the question was, how did I get to it? Well, you can tell that once you start to think about it, it's just like playing 3-dimensional chess or a Rubik's Cube. It's just fascinating.
Yes, it is. How did you put the team together from the beginning? Did you advertise for them or did they just turn up on your doorstep? Or how did you get the team from the beginning?
It's very difficult to remember now. I mean, I think...
When was it?
We started about 2010.
Yeah.
We just started asking people questions. So why can't we do this? And when we set out, we wanted to build 100% renewable power because we could then provide 100% certainty on the fuel cost. And it wasn't 100% wind. It was about 50% wind and about 50% from an off-the-shelf engine, but powered by biofuel. But we could buy the biofuel on a long-term fixed-rate contract. So what that would give us was certainty, so we could back the fuel contract with the freight contract. But that technically just looked a little bit too rich for people. So we backed off that and just said we'll go with the wind technology as a demonstrator. And so I think we asked people why we couldn't do it. And gradually I think one of the first people we met were Lloyds Register. And they said, well, you might be able to, but you've got to solve these problems. And we'd be very willing to help you look at those problems. And then we'd identified Rolls-Royce engine as something that would be potentially suitable for biofuels. So we just went and asked them if they were interested, and they were very interested in having the conversation. We had we have fantastic brainstorming sessions. They come with us to talk to clients, so they understand the shipper's needs, so we can design around the shipper's needs. So then you think, oh, well, okay, so I've got a technical team here. We can build a ship. That's fine. But actually, we need to now understand how much fuel we're going to save. And it's not, you can't just guess. If we're going to make contracts, we need to have verifiable data. So in renewable energy, there's a system which is called virtual metmast, which allows you to predict the amount of value that you will get from a wind turbine on any hill. So we went to the Met Office and said, so you know that thing you had with the metmast on the hill? Well, now we've got a moving vessel through time and space, and it's going across the sea. Can you help us build a virtual wind ship that will enable us to measure the amount of energy, fuel we can get from any ship size on any? So they said they could help us with providing 20, 30 years of data from various routes that we're interested in looking at. But then we thought, well, we need to balance that with comparing it with a traditional ship. We need to be able to say, well, we'll be, 50%, 30%, 10%, whatever the difference is. So then we started talking to people at UCL, and they were doing work with IMO on the greenhouse gas study. So they had access to data about ship performance. So they were able to kind of just generalize, a 10,000 tonner on this route would be using about this much fuel. And so we could, so then we started to develop that tool. And then, because we come from yacht racing, there was a guy who was in America's Cup racing, and he builds routing systems for racing yachts. So we can now optimize the amount of wind that you can use. So we've got sort of two technologies. We've got one which is called FastReg, which is the future automated sailing technology, FastReg system, which is the sailing automated square rigger. And we've got Tradewind, which is the verification tool, a big data system that we're developing.
So what kind of ship are you building?
We're looking at we think 12,000 deadweight dry bulker for use in and around this part of the world in Europe to start off with.
And when will it be launched?
The $1 million question. People ask me this question, and I always say, 3 years from now. And people have been asking me that since 2010. So I have this kind of flexible thing.
Can you see the end of it? Can you see that?
I can see how to get there. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We have 2 years of design development to do. So we have a prototype that we designed at 3,000 deadweight, because we kind of guessed that would be our best size, and actually it isn't. But we tested a prototype in the towing tank in the wind tunnel at Southampton University, and we need to scale that prototype for the bigger size vessel, and we need to look at how we industrialize the sailing rig. So the rig comes from, the prototype has been operating on a super yacht called the Maltese Falcon. So it's push button operated from the bridge, so you don't need extra crew. But a super yacht rig is not what we need on a commercial vessel. So we have a work package to look at taking cost out of that, but without losing performance. So we're working with Tata Steel on some of the materials that they're producing for offshore wind turbines, which are lightweight but strong and relatively cheap. We work with the National Composite Centre, so we're really pushing boundaries about how you would combine traditional materials with lighter weight materials. We're looking at that. We're looking at hulls, what's the optimal hull that we can use. We're looking at whether we can retrofit with a cost-benefit advantage, and then we're looking at the verification tool. And so we think there's a year's work in doing that, which will give us line drawings that we could then take to a yard, and cost. And then, you're a lawyer. How long it takes to do the legals is probably another year, although, shipping, but we are actively engaged with the shipper with an appetite to use the commercial vessel. So that gives everybody the reason to get up in the morning, because that contract has to be made within a certain time frame.
Exciting, really exciting.
It is exciting. It is exciting. And
if you think about, wind as fuel is there already. But if you talk about biofuel, then you need some sort of infrastructure on land.
Yeah, and that was the problem. So the biofuel that we were looking at originally was liquid biomethane, which is the same as LNG. And we thought the LNG network will have rolled out faster than it did. And we thought we'd be able to produce this stuff called liquid biomethane, which comes out of food waste, basically, but it's the same physical, chemical components as LNG. But the LNG network didn't roll out at the speed that we thought it might. But you're absolutely right. The beauty of wind and wave and solar energy is it's free. So yes, it's renewable if it's a biofuel, but it's not free. But if you've got the technology to harness that free fuel, it gives you this autonomy that I already talked about. But I think there's something really important for shipping, is that it's exclusively available to shipping at sea. Now, if you're on land and you're part of a grid system, then although you produce energy through renewable fuels, through wind, solar, there's a higher demand for it. And so the price supply demand thing is going to be impacted in the price you pay for the fuel that you take out of the grid. We have an exclusive opportunity to go to sea, and there is nobody else out there that can harness that energy. So it's free and abundantly available. And so what we're looking at is developing the technology to harness that. Once you've got that, and we won't be the only people that have solutions, there's already solar out there, there's already some early wave, there's lots of different technologies. But the key, I think, is that the people who own the technology are the energy tycoons. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at the way that solar has evolved on land, so a solar panel has come down in price 75% in the last 5 years. So what that means is the market increases. And so you can increase your manufacturing economies of scale, the unit price goes down further, so you get into this virtuous circle. So I think it's the technology that is key to harnessing this free fuel, because once you've got it, then it's abundantly and exclusively available to the ship at sea. So it has its own power source, which is...
So how will future marine engineers be educated? Will there be a new addition to their competence to...
Yeah, I've already had the great honour and privilege of talking to some marine engineering students at Plymouth University. Actually, I was invited down to talk to them, and it was fantastic because young guys and young women who are studying there are massively enthusiastic about the potential. I mean, they can see how it could be used. And I think young people are just very more... They haven't had the experiences that we've all had as we've gotten older of how change is really, really hard. They've just gone at it. It's just like, yeah, okay, well, we'll do this. And they were fantastic and really pushed my questions. I thought we were really cutting edge, but they were ready to go further than that. So a lot of them are already very interested in both the technical, but also the financial and economic modelling around it. Because I think there's some really interesting work to be done there.
So are you also moving into this circular economy?
Yeah, I love the circular economy. I think the circular economy is particularly interesting for an asset that lasts 25, 30 years. So you can see there's a risk here that I could just kind of get this whole mission creep. But if we are designing a new ship, if we get to design a new build, then why wouldn't we think about the circular economy at the same time? Why wouldn't we think about the resources that we're embedding in that new vessel? And why wouldn't we think about building it for the extreme long term? So I think of it in the same way as the Navy builds their ships for a long time, and their crew have an emotional bond to their own vessel and they look after them. And that's not to say that commercial ships don't, but what I mean is that there's a sort of, there's an agenda of repurposing, planned repurposing into the future. And I think that there's some very interesting economics to come out of that around leasing and not letting the resource in the ship get out of the circular economy. So if you own the ship and the material that it's made of is going to have a higher value in 25 years, why would you sell it? You just keep it so that you had the resource, the materials that were available, and arrange some financial or leasing product to go around it.
I listened to a carpeted floor company, a Danish one.
Interface? No, the Danish one, I know.
The guy who was making the speech, he said, well, at first we didn't know what was in our mats because we didn't know the different ingredients so well. So we didn't know how to replace them because we had to structure that to know exactly what was in them. And then we had to find new ingredients that were more environmentally friendly, that could be reused, and exchange them into our carpets. And now I think they have been doing this for 5-6 years. So now they know everything was in it and they know how to reuse them and so on. And it had turned out that you don't buy a carpeted floor from them anymore. You rent it because they come after 5 years and take it back, put new ones in.
And reuse what was there.
Yes.
And keep it within their financial system. Absolutely. It's a fantastic model. But very much more difficult if you've got an asset that lasts 25 or 30 years.
Yeah, and a ship.
Yeah, which is much more inherently complex. And I know that Maersk started to do something around the Triple E, and I've spoken to some of the guys there that were involved in that project. And you just start to scratch the surface and it goes for miles, supply chain. It just goes down lots of different angles and avenues, which is why if you start at the outset with the new design, you can perhaps start to think about it earlier in the design process. But, you know, the whole ship certificate thing about where the materials are and where they came from and where they're going and who owns them. So I think the whole of that is fascinating, and it's just beginning to be considered within the sector. But if you think about the financial implications of keeping the material within the loop, I think there's some interesting conversations, interesting thinking to go there.
How do you think that the shipping industry could become more visible?
Well, you may not be surprised to hear that, but you have a kind of modern 21st century sailing ship, then I think you have a billboard, which says so much about what the industry is doing. I think it could be a new golden age of shipping. I think we've got the opportunity to tell a very, very powerful story, because I think, you know, the thing that I found out around this shipping industry is it's just hidden. Nobody knows anything about it, and yet it is fundamental. So I was on a camping holiday with my husband on a little island, and I bought the lettuce and the shrimps and from all over this island, and I'm sitting in my armchair at the campsite with my bottle of wine, telling my husband how environmentally friendly I am because I've bought all of this. So how self-sufficient I am, look. He said, what about the chair you're sitting on? And what about the glass you're drinking out? And where did the wine come from? And it's like, yeah, but that came by ship. So you start to bring your awareness onto and so I think it's really important that we as a society understand that shipping is fundamental to our lives. And I get that it's really, really efficient way of moving freight, but I think we could make it more efficient. And I think if we look at the aviation sector, for example, they've got that project called Solar Impulse. Have you seen that?
No.
So this is a Swiss guy, and he's flying a solar plane around the world without any fuel whatsoever apart from solar. And the aviation industry is using that as a visible tool of them pushing boundaries. So I think it's not quite as blue sky as that to put a sailing ship on the water. But I think what it says is that this is an industry that's thinking about the future and will attract, we can attract new people to think about the technology, think about the economics, and think about the operation. Because, one of the things in my dream world, you'd have two ships and you'd have a race, and who could use the least fossil fuel would be the winner.
It would be interesting. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too.
Who would you be interested in listening to in a podcast? Who do you think I should interview the next time?
I'd like you to talk to a ship owner so I could understand better what obstacles are perceived to transitioning to new solutions. I think that would be a very interesting conversation. I think change is perceived to be scary, and the uncertainty of knowing how to do the right thing is what I believe to be, but I don't know that. That's just a guess. So I think I'd like to understand why the shipping industry is a bit reluctant to take new technology to heart.
Okay. I'll see what I can do. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming to London and
thank you.
Spending time here.
I hope you got some new ideas in your head now. Are we going back to a sailing vessel? Well, we will see. I am preparing myself for the 1-year anniversary of the Shipping Podcast. I don't really know how to celebrate, but I would love to celebrate with you. I would love you to actually go into the Facebook page of the Shipping Podcast and write me a comment on what you really like about the podcast or what you don't like, because I would like to know that as well. If I don't know what you don't like, I can't change it. I know that you have opinions because you tell me when I meet you, or you write it in emails. We could get that started, the dialogue that we so desperately need. We need to talk about the future. We need to talk about things that is happening right now. Am I the only one that feels that there is a paradigm shift? I hope not. Next episode will be the last one from my visit in February in London. I've just come back from another trip, so don't you worry. There are more guests in pipeline for you. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a shipping podcast where the maritime professionals are talking about their everyday job.